from Jeff, including in our special live coverage 3 hours from now. In the meantime, the president says that he is doing this for Chrysler's employees, their families, and their communities. Michigan Congressman Thaddeus McCotter doesn't exactly see it that way. Congressman, where do you draw the line?
Hi, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Same here.
The first point that's important is the one that you so rightly brought out. When you go into bankruptcy, you do not know how long it will take, and you certainly cannot predict the outcome with absolute certainty. So the very uncertainty that you're talking about is now going to continue for the people of Michigan, for the people of Chrysler. The situation in so many ways was brought on by a determination that the first plan was not viable, Chrysler could not survive, and then you give them a broad outline with 30 days to meet it. It is very difficult for a company like Chrysler, a company like Fiat, and anyone else to do that type of merger without obstacles in the way, such as the hedge funds or loose ends, preventing that deal from coming to fruition, again, within a very finite time, and that's why we are where we are today.
What do you think of the way the president did excoriate some of those private investors, the Oppenheimer funds and some of the others you've heard about, Congressman, who did not go along?
Well, the problem, again, the hedge funds were one of the loose ends that within 30 days you could not negotiate within time. And I think that that's one of the problems. When you deal with such an intricate, complex entity as a car company, such as Chrysler, with the outstanding contracts, with the outstanding obligations and liabilities, and the competing interests, if you're going to responsibly restructure it as we've always wanted, you have to give yourself time to take care of those details and get those negotiations done. And so despite some of the Herculean effort we saw, not only from the workers, not only from the company, not only from Fiat, and some of the banks that came to the table, you still had to give yourself the ability to get the other ones on board, and the artificial deadline was not met, and now the uncertainty continues.
You know, Congressman, I'm no car expert, but I've driven in a couple of Fiats. I'm probably ticking off a lot of Fiat owners. I hate them. I can't stand the cars. And they don't, the ones I've had have never been reliable. And this is the savior, and this is the one whose arms they're being pushed into. Something's not right with that.
Well, from our perspective in Michigan, we just want to keep our people working as best we can in Chrysler and protect the retirees as best we can. The Obama administration decided that the Fiat merger was one of the conditions that had to be met to avoid a bankruptcy. And even though that framework of that agreement was put in place, it still was not enough to do it.
But that's like the government forcing it. I guess when so many taxpayer dollars are involved, I guess they can enforce it. But if it's a bad merger on paper, and it just seems weird on paper, you know, I guess one could have said the same about Daimler-Benz and Chrysler years ago, but Fiat and Chrysler, I don't know. I mean, you might as well merge with Shoney's Big Boy, you know?
Well, Neil, this is one of the concerns that we've had. When we saw the Auto Task Force set up, we saw a lot of financial people on it, not a lot of auto industry people on it. So when you view it, and you rightly point out that you had driven a Fiat, you're talking about it from a perspective of the automobile industry as a consumer. Right. You're not looking at it in terms of numbers, as evidently the task force was.
Yeah, but Fiat isn't exactly on fire, Congressman. I know you're an expert at this stuff, so I defer to you, but man, they're hardly like the stellar example, you know?
Well, I can't argue the point. I've never driven a Fiat. But the problem then becomes, this was the determination of the task force in the conditions that they said, in the broad outline they gave, that had to be met. And you either meet it or go into bankruptcy, or as you say, we now are in both.
Well, let me ask you, how long do you think this lasts? And does it stave off the inevitable, which isn't just maybe being in bankruptcy longer than thought, but never coming out?
As you have again rightly pointed out, we cannot predict the outcome of a bankruptcy proceeding. You can look at it and say, well, there may be 80% of the deal done. You have outstanding hedge fund secured creditors that want to see what they can do in the bankruptcy proceedings. But you don't know who may intervene with pleadings that have to be heard by the judge. Right. You have no idea necessarily with certainty of anything that's going to come out, let alone how long it's going to go on. And this is why the threat of bankruptcy, not just liquidation, but even a quote-unquote structured bankruptcy, was driving so many people, such as the workers and the companies, to try to meet the obligations set forward by the task force. Again, it didn't work, and now we have uncertainty hanging over a whole lot of working people in Michigan.
All right, one of the few U.S. congressmen who actually knows what he's talking about. Congressman, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil.
All right.